spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for members to ask questions, and they too will be held to a strict 5 minutes. I now recognize Assistant Secretary Liu for the opening statement.
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Phillips, Chairman McCall, colleagues. When I was a junior officer in Peshawar, Pakistan 31 years ago, I got to see a Pakistani election up close. I got to see the irregularities in that election, but also the courage of the Pakistani people to come out and vote despite threats of intimidation and threats of violence. If you'll allow me today, I propose to say a few words about where the election on February 8th fell short, where we saw positive elements, and what lies ahead for U.S. policy in Pakistan. The day after the elections, the State Department issued a clear statement. We noted undue restrictions on the freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. We condemned the electoral violence and restrictions on human rights and fundamental freedoms. We condemned attacks on media workers and restrictions on the access to the internet and telecom services, and we expressed concern about allegations of interference in the electoral process and stated that claims of interference and fraud should be fully investigated. If you'll allow me, I'll drill down a bit deeper into these observations. We were particularly concerned about electoral abuses and violence that happened in the weeks leading up to the polls. First, there were attacks against police, politicians, and political gatherings by terrorist groups. Second, many journalists, particularly female journalists, were harassed and abused by party supporters. And third, several political leaders were disadvantaged by the inability to register specific candidates and political parties. On the day of elections, an internationally respected local election monitoring organization said they were barred from observing vote tabulation in more than half of the constituencies across the country. And despite a high court order not to interrupt internet service on election day, authorities shut down mobile data services, the principal means by which Pakistanis access social media and messaging apps. There were positive elements to this election as well. Despite the threat of violence, over 60 million Pakistanis voted, including over 21 million women. Voters elected 50% more women to parliament than they had in 2018. In addition to a record number of female candidates, there were also a record number of members of religious and minority groups and young people running for seats in their parliament. Pakistani voters had a choice. A range of political parties won seats in the national and provincial assemblies. 3 different political parties now lead Pakistan's 4 provinces. More than 5,000 independent election observers were in the field. Their organization's conclusion was that the conduct of the election was largely competitive and orderly, while noting some irregularities in the compilation of results. Pakistan is an important partner of the U.S. We share a commitment to strengthening Pakistan's democratic institutions, supporting the U.S.-Pakistan Green Alliance framework, cooperating to counter terrorist threats from groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and bolstering respect for human rights, including the right of religious freedom. Most importantly, the United States plays a critical role in promoting economic stability in Pakistan. We are the top destination for Pakistan's exports. We have been one of the most important investors in critical infrastructure over 76 years of our partnership. For example, the U.S. government is refurbishing now the Mangala and Tarbela dams, which provide electricity to tens of millions of Pakistanis. Our support for Pakistan over these decades has been in the form of development grants, private sector investment, and humanitarian assistance during the periods of its greatest need, including the recent catastrophic flooding. Unfortunately, Pakistan is facing a mounting debt challenge after the past decade of elevated borrowing, including from the PRC. This year, nearly 70% of the federal government's revenue is expected to go to payments to service this massive debt. Pakistan needs economic reforms, and it needs private sector-led investment that will deliver economic growth for the Pakistani people and not dig their government deeper into debt. Finally, Pakistani people deserve a country that is peaceful, that is democratic, and that is prosperous. We are working every day to support that vision. I thank the subcommittee for its leadership on developing our relations with Pakistan, and I pledge to work with its members as we execute our policy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You were precisely on time. And Alexis is going to make sure that we're all 5 minutes. And I want to commend Chairman McCall again. We now have clocks that are large enough for people of age to read. So this is a really startling discovery here. We've really come, hey, we've come a long way to have clocks you can read. But no, this is so serious. And the 70% debt payment is just so horrific, but not only is it catastrophic to the people of Pakistan, but it's a message to other countries that think that they're working with people that they can trust. They're not. They're there for a purpose, and the time needs to begin on mine now, please. And so as we begin, after the disastrous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and with the 13 murdered Marines at Abbey Gate in 2021, where does the administration see the future of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship? What are the administration's top priorities for Pakistan?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And again, thank you for holding this hearing. It's obviously of great interest for Americans generally. Clearly, in the audience today, we have lots of people who care deeply about Pakistan. We are at an inflection point in our relationship with Pakistan. As you suggest, Afghanistan has been in conflict for 40 years, and Pakistan has been a country that has been caught up in that conflict. The end of the war in Afghanistan provides us all an opportunity to have a relationship with Pakistan on its own terms, and we are committed to doing that. One of the major goals that we have with Pakistan now is to support the Pakistani people as they face this terrible threat of terrorism. Many of the members have discussed this, but this is a country where the people have suffered under the threat of terrorism in a way that I think no one on the planet has had to suffer. The attacks, particularly in the provinces of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Baluchistan, over the past 3 years have grown exponentially. We continue to see attacks being launched from Afghan territory. And you saw a major attack on Saturday in which 7 policemen were killed by the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban. And we call on the Afghan Taliban to ensure that its territory is not used as a launching pad for terrorist groups. Second, we're very focused on economic stability for Pakistan. For Pakistan to deal with its social, terrorism, and political issues, it needs a functioning economy. And we want private sector-led growth there. Growth that benefits the Pakistani people, not growth which fuels profits by lender countries like the PRC. And lastly, we have a long partnership, people to people, with Pakistan. We want to see that grow. We want to see business-to-business relations improve. We want to see the ease of Pakistani Americans to travel to Pakistan and Pakistanis to travel to the United States. Those ties are critical. I have 2 children in university right now. We have many, many Pakistani friends as they've grown up, but also in university. We want to see those numbers expand. Thank you.
And indeed, I'm glad the Pakistani American diaspora is so important, and they've been so successful as entrepreneurs here in our country, and we want them to send a message back of how free market capitalism has such a positive consequence for the people of Pakistan. Mr. Secretary, there have been unsubstantiated allegations that the U.S. government has conspired to remove Prime Minister IMRAN Khan from power. What is your assessment of these untrue speculations?
Mr. Chairman, I want to be very clear on this point. These allegations, this conspiracy theory is a lie. It is a complete falsehood. I have reviewed the press reporting related to this, what's called the cypher in Pakistan, the alleged leaked diplomatic cable from the embassy here. It is not accurate. It at no point does it accuse the United States government or me personally of taking steps against Imran Khan. And thirdly, the other person in the meeting, the then ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, has testified to his own government that there was no conspiracy. We respect the sovereignty of Pakistan. We respect the principle that Pakistani people should be the only ones choosing their own leaders through a democratic process. Mr. Chairman, we are grateful that you are holding this hearing today for us to talk about that process.
Thank you. And hey, your response is so good because it's so clear that you're correct, and we appreciate so much your clarity on the issue. And good people, indeed, you make a difference, so God bless you. Thank you. And with that, I now recognize the ranking member, Dean Phillips.
Okay.
Don't pick up your sound, not theirs. The chair notes a disturbance of the committee proceedings. The room will be in order. And we now proceed with Congressman Dean Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Liu, I appreciate your observations on the recent election, both the positive elements and also the challenges. In the State Department's post-election statement, the indication was the United States is going to work with the next Pakistani government regardless of the party. I just want to clarify that that has always been the case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the department has also expressed concerns about human rights and democracy in Pakistan where appropriate, but has never taken a position on who should lead an elected government in Pakistan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the department's statement also noted that claims of interference or fraud should be fully investigated. And since that aspect of the statement has gotten a lot of play in the Pakistani press and on social media, could you elaborate on what was intended by that statement?
Representative Phillips, the Pakistani people, through their constitution, have created a system by which the Election Commission of Pakistan hears the complaints of Pakistani people, of candidates and political parties to render judgments about election irregularities. We, as a partner of Pakistan, have called for that to be done transparently and fully, and for those found responsible for irregularities to be held accountable. We can see a process whereby that's happening. The Election Commission of Pakistan has formed a high-level committee which is now sifting through thousands of petitions from people across Pakistan who have complained about the very same things that we have noted in our statement. We will be monitoring that process very closely. We will be encouraging the government and the Election Commission to make sure that that is a fully transparent process with the Pakistani public.
Do not recognize this.
Mr. Liu, if you just might move your microphone just a little close. It's a little hard for some of us to hear too. Thank you. This is not Pakistan-related per se, but it is your area of responsibility. So I want to ask also about India. I know the administration is looking at accountability for the alarming allegations that a government of India official was connected to a murder-for-hire plot targeting a Sikh American here on American soil in New York City. The administration, of course, recently placed sanctions on more than 500 individuals relating to the killing of Alexei Navalny in Russia on Russian soil. So my question is, are any similar sanctions on or travel bans being considered for those who we believe may be responsible for the attempted murder of Mr. Pandan?
Thank you, Representative Phillips. This is a serious issue between the United States and India. The Department of Justice has alleged that an Indian citizen, at the behest of someone working in the Indian government, has attempted to kill an American citizen on American soil. We take this in the administration incredibly seriously and have raised it at the highest levels with India. We are at the moment, working with India to encourage India to hold accountable those responsible for this, this terrible crime. What we can see is that India itself has announced that they have created a committee of inquiry to look into this matter, and we ask them to work quickly and transparently to make sure justice is done.
Thank you. With the remainder of my time, I'd like to talk about economic issues. If you could give an assessment of the current economic situation in Pakistan. Of course, a growing economy is good for stability. It's good for this partnership and trade. I know it's still early, but if you could provide an assessment of how you see things right now, I'd appreciate it.
No, not only is it really important for the Pakistani people that they have economic stability and economic growth, it's important for America. We have lots of investments in Pakistan. There are lots of franchises and American businesses working throughout Pakistan. Their success is our success. One of the issues I think that we face with the Pakistani economy is a real difficulty to invest and to trade there. We are calling on Pakistan to reform many of the ways it does business with foreign partners, and in doing that, they will attract American investment, but they'll also attract investment from the Pakistani private sector. Pakistani investors are smart. They want to work in a place where they can make money. And so some of the things that we're calling for are reform of the regulations that will allow repatriation of profits out of the country, cutting down on bureaucratic red tape, and more predictable regulations. If Pakistan is willing to do that, I think you'll see large numbers of American investors flocking to Pakistan. It's a really interesting place to invest if it had the right conditions.
All right. Thank you, sir. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Dean Phillips. We now proceed to Congressman Rich McCormick of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to point out that we in Congress have a job to do. This is an incredibly important topic, and I think out of respect for those people who are interested in this topic, the people who want to be disruptive should be gavelled out and removed from this hearing. I think anybody who's earned this place, whether you be in Congress or be a military member or be somebody from Pakistan or be somebody who's interested in this topic, should be respected, and those people who break the rules should be removed from and not be allowed back in future, because this continues to waste our time. And with that, I'm going to move, with your permission, Chair, to have these people removed before I continue.
So ordered.
Thank you. All three that were speaking out, thank you. They're wearing red in case you can't figure out who they are.
I said not one word. This is very undemocratic.
But I will say free Imran Khan.
Free Imran
Okay.
Khan, the first
There you go.
democratically elected Prime Minister of Pakistan. He will save Pakistan.
The committee will suspend while the Capitol Police restore order.
Free Imran Khan.
Free Imran Khan.
Free Imran Khan, a great democratic leader in Pakistan. We need Imran Khan. Free him from a death cell in Pakistan.
And Congressman McCormick will now continue with his full 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been interrupted in the previous hearings, and I just want to make sure we have some order. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you, and I thank you, Secretary Liu, for your testimony today. Today's topic is very important to me. Whether we like it or not, the U.S. future cannot include isolationism from the rest of the world. American leadership will be required for our country's future success and to ensure America remains first in the world. We must remain robust partnerships and alliances with nations that share our interests and values. As nations like China and Russia and violent extremist organizations threaten global stability, it is critical for U.S. interests for South Central Asia countries such as Pakistan and India to continue developing stable and transparent democracies. That's why I introduced House Resolution 901 with my esteemed colleague from Michigan, Representative Dan Kildee. The resolution affirms U.S. support for democracy and human rights in Pakistan. I'm looking forward to H-Res 901's consideration later this afternoon as the House Foreign Affairs Committee marks it up. As I am sure you're aware, Pakistan recently conducted the largest election in its history, but these were unfortunately marred by allegations of fraudulent activity and electoral violence. Watchdog groups raised the alarm over reports of political repression, suspension of interest access on election day, delays in election results, and more. Currently, the Election Commission of Pakistan is reviewing many of the election results in individual parliamentary constituencies, and the Pakistani judicial system is investigating and adjudicating irregularities. In fact, the ambassador from Pakistan came to my office yesterday and talked about what they were going to try to do to mitigate these problems. With all this being said, there must be full, credible, and independent audit of these election results. Secretary Liu, do you think and the State Department have confidence in Pakistan's judicial process and its ability to adjudicate claims of wrongdoing?
Thank you, Representative McCormick. If I might, just before I answer that question, just say a word about protests. We have just tremendous respect for the Pakistani-American community. We pride ourselves in the State Department and in my office about talking to Pakistani Americans because they are the people in our vast country who care the most about this relationship. They have something genuine to offer because of their deep knowledge and the deep concern they have of the future of the country. And so I want to join the voices of this committee to say how important their involvement is, how much we respect them. We try to listen to them at every opportunity. I hope they are also listening to all of you and to those of us who are trying to guide this policy.
Absolutely. And I will say, respectful conversation is always paramount for me. I've met with constituencies. I have people who've come here from all over the United States that I've met with in my own district on this topic. There is a time and a place for everyone to speak, and that's order. That's something that we worked hard for.
One of the things that I have faced over these last 2 years is some of these allegations, unfounded allegations, have resulted in regular death threats against me, threats against my family, involvement of local police. There is a line of acceptability, and I do think at times some of the free speech has verged into threats of violence, which is not acceptable in our society. Sir, if I could answer your important question. The Election Commission of Pakistan in past elections has rerun elections where there have been a finding of electoral abuse. We have seen that over and over. In fact, in this election, they have already ordered the rerun of elections where there has been violence. As we know, there have been candidates who've been killed in this election. There have been some terrible violence that preceded the election. We call on the Election Commission to fulfill its constitutional role in Pakistan, to be the watchdog over these elections and to act in a nonpartisan way. We all will be watching this process very, very closely. As to whether they will do it, it's up to the Pakistani people to make sure their institutions are functional and that are upholding their constitution.
Thank you. And do you think that the Pakistani government has the ability to continue to improve and be accountable and be a good partner going forward as the United States needs them to be in that region?
Pakistan is such an important partner of ours. They are a major non-NATO ally. We have deep national security interests with Pakistan, not least of which is the fight against terrorism, not only terrorism that affects Pakistanis, but terrorism that affects Americans. And Pakistan has been a partner in our resettling of Afghan refugees to whom we owe a debt. And we are grateful to the people and the government of Pakistan for that cooperation.
Thank you, sir. I yield.
Thank you very much, Dr. Congressman Rich McCormick of Georgia. We now proceed to Congresswoman Kathy Manning of North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back to my good friend, Dean Phillips. And thank you, Assistant Secretary Liu, for your service to our country. I want to focus on the plight of women in Pakistan for a few minutes. I am very concerned about the treatment of women in Pakistan, including female journalists and women harassed and arrested at protests and rallies leading up to the election. As you know, Pakistan is routinely rated near the bottom of the world in terms of women's inclusion, justice, safety, and security. So can you talk to us about how the State Department is working to address gender-based violence and highlight and improve the safety, the rights, the inclusion, and representation of women in Pakistan's democracy?
Representative Manning, such an important question. I wish I had my wife here sitting next to me. I met my wife in Pakistan. She was an American refugee worker working with Afghans, but her academic subject matter of specialty is gender-based violence, and she has worked in Pakistan on this very issue. What I would say about Pakistan, its human rights, the rights of women, I say about many countries, but I really mean it, which is we as foreign partners aren't going to be able to change Pakistan. Who will change Pakistan? Pakistani people will. And we see that very strong desire of women across Pakistan to be heard, to be represented, and to have their rights respected by the institutions of government as well as by the rest of society. I see great victories in Pakistan every day. There have, as I mentioned, double the number of women elected to this parliament.
And
Incredible.
do you see that as a positive moment that will actually give hope and perhaps achieve new things for women in Pakistan?
I see the emergence of female leaders in Pakistan at every level as being the examples that will lead their society forward. You are entirely right. At the village level in Pakistan, lives for women are incredibly difficult. I see more women today in senior positions in business. I see them on the high court. I see them in parliament. I see them as ministers. Honestly, some days Pakistanis are doing better than Americans on some of these questions. It is a struggle for all of us, but I do credit the very brave women and young girls who are leading this path in Pakistan. And I think as foreign partners, we need to put our resources, our public statements, and our activism behind Pakistani female leaders.
And can you give us some idea of the percentage of participation of Pakistani women in the economy? And are there hurdles to greater participation, and is there anything we can do to encourage greater participation?
Well, one of the real issues for every business in Pakistan, but particularly for women-owned businesses, is access to financing. And so one of the things that I've seen over the course of my career, and particularly in Pakistan, is the emergence of these microfinance projects, because largely women-owned businesses are not the massive textile mills or the steel plants. They're small businesses. They're businesses run out of homes or small shops in local communities. If women have access to that financing, women will succeed in business. USAID, the EU, the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, many of Pakistan's donor friends are investing in those types of businesses, while the PRC and other countries are investing in literally roads to nowhere that bleed the Pakistani people of their resources year after year.
So we've certainly talked about giving women access to more financial opportunities in this committee. I hope we will continue to do that in the future. Because you've mentioned China, let me walk into this question with the little time I have left. Pakistan faces a grave challenge, has faced grave challenges in recent years from flooding, from indebtedness to creditors like China. What more can we do to counterbalance what China is doing and the debt that they're helping create in Pakistan?
We can compete. Where we fail overseas, we are not present. Where we compete, we always win because we have a better offer. We offer private sector-led investment for profit-making enterprises that benefit local people and not just the lender countries.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Kathy Manning of North Carolina. We'll be proceeding to Congressman Mike Lawler in 1 second. Even before, I want to thank you for pointing out the different allies working with Pakistan, and one that you left out, which is so significant, and that is South Korea. To go from ashes 60 years ago to be one of the wealthiest countries on earth is an example throughout the Indo-Pacific and the South Asia of achieving a per capita income of $44,000 for each citizen. Who would ever imagine? And I know that Korea has been vitally interested in developing economic ties with the people of Pakistan. With that, we now proceed to Congressman Mike Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. I know many of my colleagues touched on the election irregularities and some of the concerns about it. So I want to segue a little bit. Just a few weeks ago, the government of Pakistan approved plans to begin construction on a pipeline to transport natural gas from Iran to Pakistan. Iran constructed its side of the pipeline years ago, and now Pakistan has finally decided to move forward. Mr. Liu, do you view this pipeline as Pakistan aligning itself with Iran?
I mean, it's a really interesting question, Representative Lawler, because Pakistan and Iran just traded missile and drone strikes a few weeks ago. So it is been true over time that Pakistan and Iran have had ups and downs in their relationship. They're at a pretty low point today. We are tracking this planned pipeline between Iran and Pakistan. Honestly, I don't know where the financing for such a project would come from. I don't think many international donors would be interested in funding such an endeavor. We've also not heard from the government of Pakistan a desire for a waiver of American sanctions that would certainly result from such a project. Instead, what we are undertaking in the administration is to have a conversation with Pakistan. What are Pakistan's other alternatives? How can we compete for that business? Where can they find other non-Iranian sources of natural gas? And how can we help Pakistan think about the transition to clean energy? Pakistan's very interested in providing energy through solar, through wind, through hydro. How can that begin to replace their dependence on coal and other hydrocarbons?
Okay. So have you expressed direct concern with the Pakistani government on this issue?
We are in consultation with the Pakistani government on this issue, yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, my concern is that Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terror. They use the illicit Iranian petroleum oil trade to finance terrorism. Since Joe Biden took office, nearly $88 billion in increased revenue has resulted because of lax enforcement on sanctions. It's why I introduced the SHIP Act to increase secondary sanctions on the purchase of Iranian petroleum. It passed through the House overwhelmingly with bipartisan support and has since stalled in the Senate because the White House doesn't want it. So from my vantage point, when we talk about other alternatives that Pakistan may be able to engage on, why don't we start by cracking down on the illicit oil trade? Why is the administration taking a very lax approach to cracking down on Iranian petroleum?
Sir, the administration will uphold both the letter and the spirit of all sanction laws, particularly those related to Iran.
You think an increase of $88 billion in revenue is upholding the letter and spirit of the law?
Sir, I am not an expert in Iranian energy exports, but what I know as a person who has a car that's fueled by gasoline is all of us have paid for higher gasoline after Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And
well, that's also
sir,
a result in this country of us limiting production of oil and natural gas in this country. That's why we're dealing with our own energy challenges.
Sir,
but across the globe,
I could answer your question,
well, you went in a total non sequitur.
I fully support the efforts by the U.S. government to prevent this pipeline from happening. We are working towards that goal, sir.
Okay. How does the administration view Pakistan's relationship with the Taliban?
With suspicion, sir.
And so what are we doing based on that suspicion?
So I think it is well known that previous governments of Pakistan have had close relations with the Taliban. Currently, the greatest terrorist threat faced by the people of Pakistan emanates from Afghanistan. And the relationship between Pakistan and the Taliban is about the same as the relationship between the United States and the Taliban. It is very strained and difficult. We have a very important dialogue with the Pakistani government about the Taliban, how to help shape its behavior, how to help make sure the Taliban upholds its commitments.
Last question. Why Why was Pakistan excluded from the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy?
Sir, it's a way that we define the Indo-Pacific, and it's not only this administration, it's the last administration as well. For whatever reason, I suspect it has to do with COCOM authority between the Indo-Pacific Command and Central Command. The dividing line of the Indo-Pacific is the line between Pakistan and India.
Well, time is up. I have to cut you off, Mr. Liu. There's a new sheriff in town. It's me.
I recognize the sheriff's authority.
Brad Sherman from California, you're recognized, sir.
We have substantial leverage in Pakistan in two ways. First, the IMF, where we have a loud voice and we should use it more often. And second, we could deny visas to high-ranking Pakistani officials. We need to focus on human rights in Pakistan. I'm particularly focused on Sindh and the disappearances there, the forced conversions, young girls forced to convert and then marry old men. And we've seen throughout Pakistan a blasphemy law that allows a person to complain, and all of a sudden someone who's not Muslim usually is subject to detention and even execution. But the greatest problem is Dr. Afridi. That is something we discussed in this room last decade again and again. He's in jail for 14 years. We released Victor About to get an American back. And the message to everyone in the world, and this is a national security risk, is don't cooperate with the CIA. Because if you're an American national, we'll move heaven and earth to get you out. But if you're the one foreign national who did the most for America of anyone this century, you will rot in jail. The Pakistanis have said that they will do a Siddiqui for Afridi trade. Ms. Siddiqui didn't kill any Americans, tried to, ought to be in jail, is now perhaps incapacitated anyway. Will we trade Siddiqui for Afridi? And if not, will we ban from entry into this country those who are holding her hostage, Dr. Afridi hostage? Or do we just turn our back on any foreign national? The man who is responsible for getting bin Laden is in a Pakistani jail.
Representative Sherman, I first want to thank you personally, but also thank this committee and the Congress.
Sir, I have one, I will yield 10 seconds to say Siddiqui for Afridi, yes or no?
Mr. Sherman, I have been in this job for more than 2.5 years. I have never had a Pakistani official raise with me.
They've told me, they've told your predecessor, they've told the State Department, Afridi's in jail, you haven't done anything about it, and he's the man that helped us get bin Laden. But let's move on.
Sir, if I could just...
Sir, I only get 5 minutes.
Go ahead.
We have the exit control list where hundreds of American citizens are prohibited from leaving Pakistan. Will we treat them the same way we deal with everyone else who's wrongfully detained in Russia and elsewhere? What are we doing to get American citizens who have not been even charged with a crime out of Pakistan if they want to leave?
Representative Sherman, we work every day on behalf of American citizens in Pakistan. As you note, there are some laws that have put undue restrictions on Americans. We have had a very positive track record.
Hundreds are still there, and the IMF loan goes forward, and we allow the top generals in Pakistan to visit the United States when American citizens can't leave Pakistan and come to the United States. We then have the vote tabulation system, and they have banned the bat, the symbol of the PTI. Then they banned the batsman. And this is, there have been flaws in other Pakistani elections, but this is perhaps the greatest flaw. And we're told, and the Pakistani ambassadors told me, well, this is just the ordinary working of the Pakistani judicial system. That's the same judicial system that has Dr. Afridi in jail for 14 years for getting bin Laden. Do we have faith that Imran Khan has not been the victim of selective prosecution? Or is it apparent that he has been?
Sir, following the rioting on May 9th, the day Imran Khan was arrested, the United States government has raised our concerns about the mass detention of members of the opposition, to include the PTI. We have raised concerns about the use of military courts.
If I can interrupt, there's one thing you need to do. The American ambassador needs to visit Imran Khan in prison and make sure that he lives to tell the tale of how he was wrongfully imprisoned through selective prosecution. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent questions. Representative Baird is not here, so I'm the next in line. Secretary Lew, could you provide insight in the involvement of the military in the politics of Pakistan? Hold on. Y'all don't need to clap for me. I'm good. I'm good. We're good. Thank y'all. Go ahead, brother.
The Pakistani military is the 6th largest military in the world, and the largest of any majority Muslim country. The U.S. military has historically had very close relations with the Pakistani military. Our generals and their generals have trained together decade after decade. It is an important part of Pakistani culture. I have lived in Pakistan. I have seen that for myself. The Pakistani military is an important institution. We respect, in this administration and all past American administrations, the constitutional principle that the Pakistani military must be kept under civilian control. It must be answerable to the president.
But is it?
Answerable to the president, sir, who is the commander-in-chief, and responsible to civilian control.
Okay. Do y'all at the State Department intend to conduct a review of the most recent elections in Pakistan?
Sir, we have conducted that review, and we have found a number of election irregularities that I've detailed today.
Right.
What we are undertaking right now is a monitoring of how the democratic institutions of Pakistan will address those irregularities. And
I would suggest to you that a strong letter is not doing a whole heck of a lot. I would tell you that this country needs to start using its economic might to correct some of these wrongs. These people are being mistreated. I'm not much on bureaucrats. I don't like writing letters. I like delivering it personally, and I think that's something we could do. Did the U.S. ask for former Prime Minister Imran Khan's removal after he visited Russia?
we did not, sir.
Okay. There are people who believe you were involved in the regime change in Pakistan. Can you speak on that?
Sir, I was absolutely not involved, nor were any Americans involved with that process.
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever, sir.
Not contractors, not...
None, not one.
Okay. In aid to Pakistan being withheld, is aid to Pakistan being withheld because Pakistan refused to vote against the Russian invasion of Ukraine at the United Nations General Assembly?
No, sir.
All right. I have a little more time left. Do I have any members? I tell you what. Okay. Hang on for a second, Charles. I'm not used to this. All right. Well, I'll end mine then. Representative Schneider from Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman Burchett.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It's not you, it's Almost. I'm sorry. Do y'all want to fight it out, or can I?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. I'm new at this. That's why they don't let me do this very often.
Well, you're doing a great job, Mr. Chairman.
That's just because I recognized you. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Ranking Member Phillips, and greetings, Assistant Secretary Lew. I know we've touched on some of the election issues before, but like many other members of this committee, I'm concerned by the trends, but also concerned by the elections specifically. As we know, in early February, the elections were held after a nearly 3-month delay that raised serious concerns about the democratic process in Pakistan. I also know that the State Department joined other international election observers in expressing concern that the election included undue restrictions on freedoms of expression, association, and assembly. So, I want to reiterate my personal concern. The incoming that I've received has really been illuminating and suggested that there's more that we can do. I could share the chair's urging in his recent remarks that our country uses its levers to ensure that democracy is upheld. That's also why I'm proud to co-sponsor House Resolution 901. This resolution reaffirms the House of Representatives' strong support for democracy in Pakistan and urges the government of Pakistan to uphold democracy and protect fundamental rights. But as we look more broadly at human rights in Pakistan, the State Department, your agency's most recent human rights report, highlighted significant human rights challenges in Pakistan, including restrictions on freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Credible threats of violence, harassment, abductions, and killings by security forces, political parties, and other groups have led citizens and journalists to self-censor their speech for their own safety. The State Department found that the Pakistani government's failure to investigate and prosecute attacks on free speech and the press have effectively led to restrictions on free speech and the press in a very dramatic way. Really what I want to hear is how can and how will the United States work with the Pakistani government to support meaningful change to promote freedom of speech and freedom of the press?
Sir, I have the pleasure and responsibility of reading the Pakistani media on a daily basis. And I will confirm what is in our human rights report is there is both self-censorship and occasionally active censorship in Pakistan today. At the same time, what I read in the Pakistani press is a cacophony of voices. There is actually competition in the media with respect to things that are said and not said, as well as in social media. And so one of the most damaging things that we see today are restrictions on social media because, like the rest of the world, Pakistanis are getting a lot of their news and information through the internet. And so when the internet gets pulled down or X gets throttled as it has been now for several weeks, it denies the Pakistani people from getting the kind of diversity of reporting information that they deserve. We are talking to the Pakistani government at the highest level about these issues. We're also working year after year in the trenches with Pakistani civil society to help to train journalists about fact-checking, about responsible sourcing of their information, about journalistic standards. And what I can also see is, while there is censorship, both self and active, we can also see the development of some truly excellent journalism coming out of Pakistan and some very brave journalists who defy these censors and still produce things that call into question the government or the military or the Americans or any number of other institutions of authority.
If I may,
Sir.
What exactly have those conversations yielded with the government? Because I mean, it's one thing to have them, but it's another to be pursuing, some outcomes that are beneficial to the values that we uphold here and we want to see in a real active democratic society.
I do think it's important for both the administration and the Congress to say loud and clear that we are watching what happens in Pakistan. We're watching closely its human rights record, what it does with respect to religious freedom, and what it's doing on free speech. I grant you, I don't know that what we say today affects exactly what they're going to do tomorrow, but over time, if we let up on these values, it's going to be worse because they can see that there are no consequences for these violations.
Well, my time is expiring. The only thing that I want to leave you with is I think we have a responsibility to make that concern clearer, more active, and seek the outcomes that we believe in maintaining our democracy. My time has expired. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you very much. And We now proceed to Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois, and of course, it's really easy to get confused between Gabe Amo and Brad Schneider. They both come from assorted northern states, Rhode Island and now Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. And no good deed going unpunished. Gabe asked the question I wanted to ask, and thank you for your answer. I'm going to build on that. You know, in your written testimony, you concluded that the Pakistani people deserve a country that is peaceful, democratic, and prosperous, quotes. And we just talked a little bit about what the United States can do, but let me just say here that a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous Pakistan is not just important to the Pakistanis, it's in the interest of the United States as well. And that's why we were having this hearing, and I thank the chairman for calling it. And we're addressing what has been discussed, very real concerns about the election, but also recognizing, as you noted in your testimony, the positive elements seen in the election and how we build upon them. And I hope we continue those conversations. I want to shift gears a little bit and touch on Afghan deportations, though. I share, with others, the deep concern of these mass deportations of undocumented Afghans back to Afghanistan, where they're going to live in horrible humanitarian conditions under the Taliban. Human Rights Watch claims that Pakistani authorities have committed widespread abuses against Afghans living in Pakistan to compel their return to Afghanistan, including by confiscating property, destroying documents, and physically abusing individuals. Has U.S. raised these concerns with the government at all, and how is the U.S. working with the international community to push back against this policy?
Thank you, sir. We have had discussions with the Pakistani government at the highest levels about these deportations. As you know, as has been well documented, over 500,000 Afghans have returned to Afghanistan following this effort by the Pakistani government to remove illegal foreigners. From the first day of that process, we have been in touch with the Pakistani government, both about the humanitarian consequences of this mass deportation, but also to try to protect those Afghans who have a pathway to coming to the United States. There are thousands of Afghans who worked with us, who worked with our embassy or our military, who have fled to Pakistan and sought sanctuary there. We have been very keen that those Afghans are allowed to stay so we can process them.
And they're still in processing. So.
And they are. And the Pakistani government has actually, on this one issue, been very supportive. We are grateful for that. On the broader issue, we are talking with the new government now about trying to make sure that the rights of Afghan refugees are respected. We are thankful, right? The Pakistani people have hosted over 3 million Afghan refugees now for over 40 years. It is historic in proportion. That sacrifice does not go unnoticed. At the same time, we very much hope they work with the UNHCR as they enter this next phase where they're trying to figure out whether more people are returning, whether some of those who have returned are able to come back to Pakistan, and that the needs of those refugees are being met.
Thank you, and I've raised this previously with the ambassador, Pakistani ambassador as well, and look forward to working with you to make sure that happens. I'll shift gears again. We touched on this. I'll pick up where Mr. Lawler left off. Pakistan-Iranian relations. You mentioned the escalation, the recent escalatory environment, the strikes in January. Where do you see that moving? Do you think the strikes were one-off occurrences or something that could continue to escalate in the future?
Sir, as you know, the strikes were not only against Pakistan, they were against 3 countries simultaneously by Iran. It is reprehensible and irresponsible for Iran to lash out against its neighbors for terrorism that exists in Iran itself. So as you may be tracking, those 3 missile and drone strikes that happened in January followed a really terrible terrorist attack that occurred within Iran. And the government of Iran clearly felt like it had to respond in some way. They responded in the worst way possible by firing missiles at targets that they probably didn't well understand, which, for our information, ended up killing lots of civilians in 3 countries, including in Pakistan.
And with my last,
we have strongly condemned Iran's actions.
my last few seconds, can you just touch on the U.S. messaging to the Pakistani government regarding their direct engagement with Tehran on security matters, especially in the context of our concerns, our mutual concerns of nuclear proliferation and Iran's nuclear program?
Sir, we have warned them about our red lines, legislative, but also in terms of how we cooperate with Pakistan. If they get into bed with Iran, it'll be very serious for our relationship.
Okay, we need to reiterate that again and again and again. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois. We now proceed to Congressman Greg Casar of Texas.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks also to the ranking member for having me here today. Mr. Liu, I'm sure you're aware, I led a letter alongside 30 of my colleagues here in Congress to the State Department as well as to the President. You've got it right there, talking about credible allegations of election rigging in the Pakistani elections. And we urged that the administration withhold recognition of the new government in Pakistan until a credible and transparent investigation on election interference had been conducted. I know that the U.S. Embassy congratulated Mr. Sharif, quote, on his assumption of the office of Prime Minister, but I haven't seen a statement yet from the State Department itself. So just so we're clear at this point, yes or no, has the U.S. officially recognized the new government in Pakistan?
Representative Casar, I would like to answer with yes or no. The actual answer is a little more complicated, if you'll allow me. The government of the United States, we don't actually go around recognizing or withholding recognition of new governments. That's not something we do anywhere around the world. What we do is we decide whether we're going to engage with a government. And so, yes, you have seen actions by our ambassador, our embassy. We are, in every interaction with this government, stressing the importance of accountability for election irregularities, sir. Can I just also add, your letter is incredibly important. It's important that the Pakistani people, the Pakistani government hear not only from the administration, but from members of Congress, and having so many of them speak together has real influence. The administration largely agrees with your recommendations. We have done many of the things that you have proposed. We have said publicly and privately that we want to see transparent and credible investigation of election irregularities. We have called for accountability for mass detentions of people in the opposition, and we have said loudly and clearly that military trials for civilians accused of crimes after May 9th is not in keeping with international norms.
I appreciate that. And so in other cases, for example, in the case of Venezuela or some other countries where the State Department has spoken out very clearly about election rigging, and we can talk about separately about how it is that we treat those governments or treat those countries, but it seems that when we have had allegations of election rigging, that we've spoken out much more clearly than in this case. And I would urge that we continue to speak with the level of moral clarity that we have in other situations. But I appreciate your recognition and speaking out here today about how it's not okay for us to be having journalists jailed, for Twitter to get shut down, for there to be this continued, very clear to me, interference in democracy. Given the credible allegations of fraud and rigging, what gives you confidence that this government will have the democratic legitimacy necessary, not only for the interests of the Pakistani people, but for the interests of the United States?
Sir, the political and economic stability of Pakistan is important for the United States. It is important that the Pakistani people...
And I'm short on time. Is it your sense right now that there is going to be that democratic legitimacy, or do we have real concerns? I'm sorry, I have one more question for you, so just give me your
Sir, I think that's up to the process ongoing now in the Electoral Commission of Pakistan.
One more question. Most security assistance to Pakistan has been suspended since 2018. Recently, the Pakistani ambassador said that Pakistan's awaiting a decision from the U.S. on increasing military sales and financing. Yes or no, are there ongoing conversations about increasing military assistance to Pakistan?
No ongoing conversation about large-scale increases, no.
That's good to hear. Given that the U.S. has already sent hundreds of millions of dollars in aid, are there any steps the State Department is taking to ensure that the aid we send is not used for any of these abuses that you've identified?
Sir, absolutely. There is very close monitoring of where our military assistance goes around the world, including to Pakistan. For example, the F-16s sold to Pakistan over 40 years ago have active U.S. technical security teams monitoring their use every day.
Thank you for that. Has the U.S. identified any units of military or security forces that would not be eligible for aid?
Yes.
We have identified those. Thank you for your clear answers. Thank you for being here through this hearing, and I hope that we can, after this hearing, continue the work of making sure that we actually fully investigate the election and that we actually make sure people are let out of jail that were put in there that unfairly, because democracy in Pakistan, of course, will serve the people of Pakistan, but it is so clearly in the United States' interest. I started out on this seeing the failures we had in Latin America of prioritizing military relationships over democratic relationships, and it never served us there, and it won't serve us in Pakistan very well. So thank you so much, Mr. Liu.
Thank you, sir.
I yield back, Chair.
Thank you very much, Congressman Greg Casar of Texas, and now proof that we've got really good people from Texas on both sides. Congressman August Pfluger of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting me wave on to this committee. I know that we've been having this discussion between several members, bipartisan discussions on this very important issue. So I very much appreciate the ability to wave on today, and obviously have some concerns about what has happened in the past few weeks and months, and appreciate you being here, Mr. Liu. Thank you for your time today. These questions have probably been asked, but I want to ask them again. As an interested citizen, as somebody who believes in free and fair elections, and really just want to get a general assessment regarding the fairness of the elections in Pakistan, what your general thought is before I go into some deeper questions.
Sir, we share the view of local election observers who have, in summary, said this was a competitive and orderly election, but they note irregularities in the compilation of the results that should be fully investigated.
Do you believe that the recent election was free and fair?
Sir, we have never used the term free and fair in the characterization of this election.
To what level, then, would you say interference happened?
Sir, we have expressed, and I've said this multiple times today, serious concerns about the pre-election environment, violence that occurred, terrorism and political violence. We have expressed concern about the failure to register individual candidates and political parties, the mass arrests of those in opposition, the shutdown of internet, and the censorship and pressure placed on journalists.
Do you believe that those, without those specific examples, and would definitely like to hear more examples, but without those examples of interference, I'm not sure if you're going to use that term, but please tell me what adjective you would use to describe it, and without those things having happened, would the election results be different?
Sir, you ask an important question, and I think the answer to your question is the Election Commission of Pakistan, should it find that these irregularities are substantiated, should rerun elections where there's been interference. And that's the way the Pakistani people will know. It's probably unlikely that an American diplomat will know whether or how the results would turn out, but they'll turn out the way they should if the Election Commission reruns constituencies.
What is the Department of State doing to urge Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, those that govern the elections, to do just that?
Sir, we have made very clear public and private statements. We have said so clearly to Pakistan's leaders, but also to election officials, that it is an expectation of all of Pakistan's partners, not only the United States, that they conduct elections with integrity.
So you believe these should be fully investigated and adjudicated?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what this does to the relationship between the United States and Pakistan if they are not investigated, if they are not adjudicated, if they do not decide to rerun their elections.
We have enjoyed 76 years of partnership with this country. It will be an impediment to our relationship if Pakistan does not have a democratic process that upholds its own constitution. It will retard our ability to have the type of relationship we want in security matters, on business fronts, and people to people. All of that suffers if Pakistan is not a full democracy.
Recently, I marked up in the Committee of Homeland Security a bill that will soon go to the full committee in the Homeland Committee on transnational repression. Is the State Department monitoring reports of transnational repression made by Pakistani Americans? And if so, what steps is the State Department taking to address these topics?
Sir, we are tracking transnational repression around the world, including with respect to allegations made about Pakistan. We are looking very closely at the examples offered. If we find that they are substantiated, we will address them directly with the Pakistani government.
I thank the witness. Mr. Chairman, once again, thank you for letting me wave on. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman August Pfluger of Texas. And I want to thank the witness for the valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witness, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to committee rules, all members have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to the length limitations. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.